Once we know how to accept form data, we have to learn how to store it in the database so we can access it later. WordPress gives us a table called options that we'll use for that purpose. The options table has 4 fields: option ID, option name, option value, and auto load. The option ID will auto increment, so we don't have to worry about that. The option name will take a unique name so we can easily find our specific plugin information in the database. The option value will store all of our plugin information that we want to save. The auto load field will leave to the default yes so that our information is available as soon as WordPress starts to run. We'll have a few pieces of information we want to store in our database, like the username, the profile feed, and the time we last updated it. Now, we could store each of these values as their own entry in the database, but it's a better idea to combine these values into an array and then store that array as a single entry. MySQL doesn't actually accept arrays as a format, so we'll have to serialize our array into a string. Whereas a normal PHP array would look like this, a serialized array would look like this. It's the same data, just converted into a string. Don't worry if this doesn't make any sense. We don't really have to understand how this works, since WordPress will automatically serialize and unserialize our data for us. You can see, though, that when this starts with A, it's telling us that the serialized data is an array. When working with the options table, we'll need to be able to create, read, update, and delete data. We refer to this as CRUD. WordPress gives us a few functions to help us with this. Add option, which accepts the parameters of option name and option value. Get option, which accepts the parameter of option name. Update option, which accepts the parameters of option name and option value. And then delete option, which accepts the parameter of option name. Now that we know this, let's put CRUD into action with our WordPress options table. Before we start reading and writing from the options table, we're going to come up to our global variables and create a new variable called options and set it to be an array. Then we can come down into our options page function, and underneath global plugin URL, we'll add global options. Now we can come down into our conditional statement where we assign the variable WP Treehouse username, and instead of just saving it as a variable, we'll take the extra step and write it into our options table. We'll write out options, and then inside of that, we'll say WP Treehouse username. Then we'll assign this the value of WP Treehouse username. We'll also take one extra step and add the time that we updated this, because that will be helpful for us later on. So we'll say last updated and set that equal to the current time. Now that we've assigned everything, we'll come down and call the update option function, tell it that the name of the row that we'll be using is WP Treehouse badges, and then we'll pass in the array of options. Now that we've saved everything properly, we need to come down outside of this conditional statement and pull the data back out so that we can use it. To do this, we'll say options is equal to get option WP Treehouse badges. We can then say if options is not equal to blank, we can come down and set up a variable for WP Treehouse username and assign it the value from the options table. We can then come back into our plugin page, submit a username, and see everything display how we expect. However, what's different now, though, is that if we click on Treehouse Badges again, since it saved everything from the database, we could still see everything displayed here, even if we refresh the page, leave, or come back to it. The only problem is we have no way of going back and deleting that username or changing it. So, what we're going to do is underneath the profile, we're going to display another field that tells us the username and allows us to change it. To do this, let's come back into our page wrapper, copy our original form that we made, come down below the profile, and while we're still inside the inside div, we'll paste in this new form. We'll make a small adjustment here and change the save value to update, as well as come and simplify Treehouse to just say username. We're also going to go ahead and remove the table here since it'll cause us some formatting issues, and simply use a paragraph tag to wrap the label as well as our input field and our submit field. We can come back to our settings page now and see that we now have a field to update the username. However, this looks a little strange, so let's come back and remove the class of regular text, which determines the size of the field, and we can see that this looks a little bit better. However, we don't see the current username displaying here. What we could do is come in to the value field and add a PHP statement that says echo out the WP Treehouse username. We know from our conditional statement that the username has to be set and not equal to blank, so we should be fine in here just calling the variable. Let's come back, refresh our page, and we can see that we have the proper username here. Now, if I were to delete it and click Update, we could see that we go back to just having the Treehouse username. However, we also see that our profile information is still here. If we come back in and check our conditional statement again, and think about our logic, we're saying if this value is set or the username is not equal to blank, we could see that we actually want to change this to make sure that both of these conditions are correct. If we come back and refresh our page now, we should see that we only see the proper field. When we submit a value, we see both, and then when we take away that value, we only see this. We also know that we have all of this information stored in the database for use later.